Ishwaram, as resplendent sun. It's the start of a bright new day. Time to rise, time to shine, Lord divine. Time to lead us along life's way. Awake, Lord of Buddha party. Awake, O Lord, over all mankind. Awake, O Lord of compassion, that the world good fortune may find.
Okay, Sairam, Sairam, Sairam. We all listened with great interest to the panelist of young adults. And I refer to the comment of one of the young adult panelists when he mentioned about the object of any object in a dream, legitimate object, is to wake up. And I asked Swami one time, I said, Swami, you say this is a dream, but we see you working very hard day and night, never stopping. So what are you doing here in this dream, Swami? It was just a dream. So he didn't answer. Hislop, I have come here to help you to lead a happy life. I have come here to help you do your great achievements in the world and in space. He said, Hislop, I have come into this dream to help you wake up. That was the central statement, the central reason for his being here in this dream that he said. Now, I want to make a couple additional comments of what we were saying yesterday. One of the principal strengths of the crucifix, which I did not mention, was that the crucifix is made from the same wood of the cross that Christ was crucified on. It is wood from that actual cross. And Swami explained his long delay, the length of his breathing into his hands on those twigs, by saying it took quite a bit of looking to find any of that wood after so many years. Then I'm asked to speak about what Swami said about diet. Now, Swami told me over the years three things about diet. Number one, that the food should be prepared in the household because the bad traits of the person who prepares the food attaches to the food and will enter into your person when you eat that food. And he gave some striking examples of that, which we haven't time to do now. But that is what he said about diet. The second thing he said was that if you eat meat, then the strong, violent emotions of the animal enter into you and disturb your entire being. And the third thing he said was that if you are sick or ill, then you need strong vitamins like mutton and chicken. So the point is to use common sense. Then I was asked to just briefly relate the story of the resurrection of Walter Cowan. And that would be of interest because some new information has come to hand. You may recollect that at a conference in Madras, we heard that aged American had died. And since Walter Cowan and his wife had just arrived, we assumed at once it was Walter Cowan. And we were staying in the same hotel. So we immediately went up to Walter Cowan's room, and Mrs. Cowan said, yes, Walter died last night. I called Mrs. Rottenlaw, who was just down the corridor from us, to come and help me, and together we lifted him up on the bed, and then I telephoned the nursing home to come and get him. So the hearse came, I don't know if it was a hearse, but the hospital wagon came and carried him away. And then we went to Swami, and Swami said, well, I will go there in the morning. So Mrs. Cowan expected that Swami would come and get her, but he didn't. So she went to the hospital about 10 o'clock and found Cowan alive. Now, then the question arose, did Cowan really die? Cowan thought he died, and the reports we had were that he was cold as a rock and dead. And so the suspicion was there, and it has been voiced in various publications. But some new information has come to hand. Mrs. Rottenlaw, Mr. and Mrs. Rottenlaw live on the campus with Swami. She cooks for him when he's there in Vrindavan and is with him all the time. Bill Harvey knows Mr. and Mrs. Rottenlaw. And a couple of years ago, I somehow or other mentioned to Mrs. Rottenlaw again about the Cowan affair and how somebody in a book had thrown cold water on the whole idea. And she said, no. She said, I myself went with Swami. Swami took me with him to the nursing home. We went into the room where Cowan was, and there were 2 or 3 nursing personnel in the room with us. Cowan was laying on the bed, covered by a sheet, as cold as ice, dead, dead, dead. And Swami went and stood beside him, lifted his hand, and struck Cowan on the chest. Rise, Cowan. Again, rise, Cowan. And again, rise, Cowan. And on the 3rd blow, Cowan moved and got up and came back to life. So that's the new information on the Cowan resurrection. And then Cowan was taken to the hospital, and that same day, Swami was to give a talk to the Indian Seva ladies of Madras and present them with saris, which he often does. And an Indian chap and myself were sitting on the stage with Swami. We were against the wall, and Swami was talking. And he gave his talk without interruption all the way through. Then we got in the car, and he said in the car, when we got in the car, he said, Cowan died again, and I had to go and take care of matters. Well, we were watching Swami every moment he was on the stage, and he did not stop one moment talking, nor did he leave the stage. And yet when we got in the car, he said, I left the stage and went and brought Cowan back to life again. Then we got in the car, and we were going to the home of a devotee for lunch. And when we got to the devotee's home, Swami turned to me and said, Hislop, I'm afraid you cannot have lunch with us. You must go to the hospital. And he made some vibhuti, and he said, you put some of this in Cowan's mouth and rub the rest on his chest. And he said, if you just go to the corner there, you'll find Mrs. Hislop in a taxi. Well, what had happened was my wife couldn't go with us, but she was determined to be in on the action, so she hired a taxi and was following us wherever we went, keeping out of sight. And we had come to the home of the devotee. She had parked around the corner in the taxi. So sure enough, there she was. So we went to the hospital, and I got to the hospital, and Mrs. Cowan said, oh, a while ago, Mr. Cowan seemed to die again. He lost consciousness and was dead still. So I called on Swami in panic, and Swami came and resurrected Cowan again, exactly confirming Swami's story. Yet on the stage, I'll swear that Swami didn't leave that stage for 1 second. Then after that, Cowan passed away another time. Swami said he died 3 times. The last time was in Bangalore, in the hospital in Bangalore, and Swami and I went in the car from Prasanthi Nilayam to that hospital and talked to Swami, to Cowan, and he had recovered again. So that's the end of that story. Now we're ready for questions. Hey, who's going to listen to the question and tell me what it said? Who has good ears? You're a young man. All right.
We have microphones for them to use.
Oh, okay, we don't want to slow up proceedings, though.
Please wait for the microphone.
I think if the person just spoke in a loud voice and you listened and told me, might speed things up.
Okay.
Or you?
Jack?
Yeah.
Quite a few of our people were asking for clarification on Swami's statement related to the death or the non-death of Jesus. It's written that Jesus didn't die but lived later in the Far East, or that he died and was resurrected. Can you clarify what Swami says on that? Thank you.
Well, Swami had said that in his early years, Jesus did go to India. And sometimes he was dressed as a ragamuffin beggar, and sometimes like a yogi, and he wandered all over India and went into some of the adjoining countries, and then returned to his native land. Now, about the death of Christ, do you all remember Dick Bach? He made some of the early videos. And so I was going to India, and Dick Bach said, Jack, would you mind asking Swami on my behalf, we want to make a picture of Jesus, and we want to give the right information, because the lady in England had asked Swami, and she reported that Swami had said that the physical body of Jesus was resurrected and went someplace else. Whereas Swami had told me, looking at the picture of the crucifix one time, we were talking about Jesus, he said, look at that face, Hislop. He said, that's a dead face. It's a dead face, Hislop. I made this crucifix of Jesus after he was dead. Dead face, Hislop. So there's two completely contrasting stories. What Mrs. Mason said and what Swami told me. So Dick Bach wanted to clear up that confusion for his movie. And so I accosted Swami and told him about this dilemma. And Swami's reply was, that Dick Bach, always looking for some way to improve his story so to make more money. And he says, let him make his own story and film it. So that's all I know about the death of Christ. Okay. Next one. Next question.
Yesterday, when you were talking about going with Swami to the Himalayas in Shimla, you said that this lady came up and he materialized a necklace of diamond and some earrings for her. Did you happen to ask her who she was? Could she be Parvati?
What'd she say? Who's the lady that rose up from the cliff? The lady who came up from the abrupt cliff, and for whom Swami said, oh, at last you come. You know, I was afraid to ask Swami because it was none of my business. So I didn't. And then the next question about that came, was there anything else of such an unusual nature that happened? Well, there was. People apparently had heard we had gone there, so they started to come from Simla, following Swami, wanting to be there too. Swami saw the cars coming, and so we had abruptly ended the visit in that person's property, which was inside the fence. And the ladies had to put the food back in the car, and we started back to Simla. Now, on the approach to this place, we've passed through a vast flat area covered with snow. So on the way back, Swami stopped the cars, and we got out and walked in the snow and started to throw snowballs at each other. But nobody threw a snowball at Swami. But then the mysterious incident is that by that time there were a string of cars passing through the snowfield. Of course, they didn't know that we were playing in the snow. They were looking, I suppose, for Swami way further on. But the traffic was such that for a moment the cars were stopped. When they were stopped, Swami left the snow, went to the car right opposite him on the road. In that car was a sort of portly, big Indian man. And the man rolled down the window without saying one word. Swami moved his hand and created a ring and put it on the man's finger. The man didn't say a word. Swami didn't say a word. Then Swami turned around and came back to the snowfield. Crazy, mysterious. Next question.
I have a question from a friend of mine. She has to leave today, so she asked me to ask this question to you. A tape was made by you recording Mr. Murthy, the son of Kasturi, regarding the Gayatri mantra. And she said, I understand you made this tape because you heard Gayatri recital differently in different centers, and asked Baba for a definitive version for devotees. So then I heard a recording of Swami himself reciting the Gayatri mantra, and it is slightly different from the Murthy version. So I have heard several Indian devotees say that the tape you made was for Western devotees, and her question was that how important it is to recite the Gayatri mantra exactly, and which version they should use.
Yeah, the question years back, when we in America were reciting the Gayatri mantra in various ways, wasn't standard. I thought we should know what Swami approves. So I told Swami that and asked him, would he ask somebody to make a tape with exact correct pronunciation of the mantra. So he called in Dr. Murthy, and he drilled Murthy for half an hour, again and again and again, until Murthy got it exactly right. And then they made the recording. Now, shortly thereafter, Dick Bach had a recording made at one of the meetings, and Swami pronounced the mantra a little differently. He went up in sound instead of staying level at one particular place. And so Dick was doubtful of what was correct. So all I could say is that Swami made that tape in response to my request for the Western people. He drilled Murthy again and again until he got exactly right. So how can we go wrong in reciting the mantra that way? That's all I know about it. Next question.
Yes.
In our culture,
Yes.
It's very much where people embrace each other and hug. And in your book, Conversations, there was a chapter in which Swami specifically talked about not to touch other bodies. Could you talk a little bit more on this?
The question is hugging each other. That is not in the family. Swami says what happens in the family is correct. He's talking about hugging people socially when we go out to Sai meetings or other places. This hugging and kissing is very common, especially in Western society. So what did Swami say about that? He said that there is a power in the human person called the power of consciousness. And when you touch or hug another person, all the evil and bad traits of that person tend to flow into you, and your good traits tend to flow out, leaving you in a minus position. And so he said That is why, throughout the ages, people have always wanted to touch the feet of sacred people, with the thought that their bad traits would flow into the sacred person who could eat them up, and his good traits would flow into them. Now, the preferred place to touch on the foot of the sacred person is the big toe, because the velocity of the life current is greatest as it goes around the big toe. That's all I know about that. Next question.
Dr. Sandwise, yesterday you touched upon... Huh? Dr. Hislop?
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry for the misstep up. Yesterday you touched upon how to self-realize, and I was reading a book by Mind and the Spirit by Sandwise, and he seems to approach through the chakras and lower chakras, higher chakras, then only you can go up. And yesterday you said you had a discussion about this with Swami. Could you share your thoughts with us on this?
What did you say?
Could you share the difference between what you said yesterday about the two paths versus Dr. Sandwise with the chakras?
Well, the chakras.
And the chakras.
Okay, the question is, how about the chakras? I asked Swami that years ago, and Swami said to me, Hislop, that's just a myth. There are no such things as chakras. That's just an idea of a point around which the nervous system is centralized. So I put that in the first edition of Conversations. And then about 3 or 4 years later, Swami said to me, Hislop, on the next edition of Conversations, I want you to take out that paragraph about the chakras and eliminate it. So then I did so. Then I asked Mrs. Cowan what was going on, because she was there. I asked Swami up in Swami's room at breakfast time. And she said, after Hislop left, I said to Swami, Swami, why did you tell that to Hislop? Don't you know he's going to put that in his book? You know, this false information about the chakras. And Swami's reply to her was, well, I had to. If I said there were chakras there, the crazy fellow would go out and try to find them. So apparently the chakras are there. Now further about the chakras, the Kundalini Yoga. Swami says that anything having to do with pranayama, breathing, exercises, is very, very dangerous. And there isn't anybody here on earth today of these teachers of pranayama who themselves have gained self-realization through the technique that they are teaching to other people. And he said, about the chakras, don't worry, Hislop. They will play their part naturally without any interference whatsoever from you. So that's all I know about chakras. Next question.
Yes. Everything that happens is Baba's will. How can we, if he works through us and everything is his, how can we give our thoughts, our actions back to him? They're already his.
Lady asks about a troublesome question. That is the surrender of all things to Swami and his will. You see, since there's only one and not two, then any idea we have about a separate entity is ignorance, is delusion, is Maya. There's only one, and only one doer, and that's Sai. Now, our responses to situations depends upon a jillion different things. There's the energy of the moment that we have to act. Then there are the various, what do they call them in the mind? The, yeah, well, I'll skip that. My mind goes back to it. In addition to that, we were told things as a child by our parents. We're told other things by our teachers. We're bombarded continually by the media. And therefore, how do we know where the source of that which we think we are going to do? Is it really and truly our own wish to do it? What is our own wish? Our own wish is influenced by all sorts of different things, what our school teachers said, our experiences we've gone through, and so on. So there's a whole mess of influences bearing upon us at any moment that we are supposed to do an action. And more than likely, the dominant aspect of those influences is going to prevail. Now you could say that, let's say all the influences, negative and positive, happen to be for one moment in complete balance. So the energy at that time is neutral, neither positive nor negative. Then you could say, well, then I at that moment can act freely of my free will, and I am the doer. But at that moment, you really don't know all about yourself. And your idea that you're acting out of free will is very likely quite wrong. So therefore, Swami says that it's the best thing to just assume that everything that happens is Swami's will. Accept it as his will, and do the best you can with it. Now, what should you do with what happens to you? You should, first of all, use common sense. Swami says that first comes common sense, second comes spiritual sense. So any situation that faces you, first of all, you should use common sense. Then, if you doubt your common sense, you can ask Swami, what is the right thing to do? Where is Swami? Swami is right here in your conscience. Swami said again and again that the voice of conscience is his voice. He dwells in the person as the conscience. Now the conscience is very easy. If you put the question to the conscience and you feel okay, you don't feel any disturbance at all, then it's probably okay. Go ahead and do it. If you feel a little squeamish about it, just not right about it, then the conscience is negative and you shouldn't do it. So then Swami says that it's a part of wisdom to any action that you're going to do, whether you think it's free will or whether you think it's karma or anything else, regardless, you should dedicate that action to the Lord. See? Dearest Lord, I dedicate this action to you. Whether it's eating a meal, whether it's walking, whether it's speaking here, no matter what it is, whether you're meeting some crisis, some situation, dedicate that action to God. Dedicate it to Him. And then go ahead with the action, and if you do the action then in such a way with the idea of having the action be pleasing to God, that is, dedicate the action to God, then perform the action in a way that you feel would be pleasing to God, then you will always be acting with wisdom. That is Swami's statement. It's a very practical thing. Dedicate the action to God. Then do the action in a way that will be pleasing to Swami, not that you can clearly see would not be pleasing. Do the action in a way that's pleasing to Swami, then you will always be acting with wisdom. Okay, next question.
Sir, there is a small question. Swami has cured many sick people even from giving the life from death, you know. Do you have any such cures for the mentally retarded children? At any time Swami has done anything like that? And really it is people who suffer from throughout the life I have seen.
As I understand the question, you ask if Swami has said anything about retarded children and their parents.
Exactly, that's true.
At one time, a parent came to me and said they had heard that mentally retarded children were in fact extremely high personages. And they were born because of karma in the world, but they were not responsible for what they did because they were well beyond that. So I put that question to Swami, and he said, no, absolutely not. That any circumstances in which we are born is the reaction that follows prior action. There is no consequence without a cause. There's nothing that happens that doesn't have a cause. You all know the revolving wheel of life described by the Buddha, in which every effect has a cause, and that effect gives birth to another cause, and the wheel of life constantly revolves. So the question then is, are we always the victim of our karma? Can we ever escape our karma? The Buddha also told his monks in a gathering, I think I told you this before, I may have said it again anyway, that, O monks, you fear your karma. You should not fear your karma. That the karma is not attached to you, O monks. It is yourself who is pulling the karma behind you. You may just let go of the karma at any time and be completely free of it. He said the karma is like a string of beads, O monk, that you are holding and pulling behind you. And any moment that you wish to, you can let go of those string of beads and be totally free of karma. That was the monk's, Buddha's message to his monks. And Swami, in effect, says the same thing, that any time you choose to recollect yourself and be as you really are, then the karma is completely finished and gone. And he said, how can you be what you are? That is himself, the Lord. Anytime. He said, you hear Tattva Asi, that thou art, which is the truth. Why then aren't you God immediately? Immediately. You hear the truth, why aren't you God immediately? Why don't you shuffle all this Maya and ignorance that you're playing with every day and immediately be what you are? He says, but you don't. So therefore you engage in sadhana and all sorts of activities. Next question.
Dr. Hislop, does Swami ever speak of the future of mankind?
Question is, does Swami ever speak of the future of mankind? Yes, indeed he has. He said it is the goal and the destination of every member of the human race to return to the source from which he came, which is God. No matter how many times a man may fall into the slime, he will rise again, and eventually he will return to the source from which he came, which is God himself. That's the history of mankind, the future of mankind. Next question.
I have two questions, quick ones. First one relates to the Gayatri Mantra again. Gayatri Mantra. There is a new Satya Sai Gayatri. A handout was given to us in the center recently. It reads, Sai Shuraya Vidmahe Satya Devaya Dhimahi Tanno Sarva Prachodayat. My question is that, do you know the significance of this? If we had to select one, should we be doing the Om Bhurvasva or this one? And things like this. Basically, I want to know your comments on Satya Sai Gayatri.
What do you say?
Oh, Sai Gayatri and Gayatri.
Yeah.
Difference. What is the significance?
Oh, what is the significance of the Gayatri Mantra?
No.
Sai Gayatri.
Huh?
Sai Gayatri.
Well, the Sai Gayatri.
Yeah, there is a new
I'm
Satya
ignorant
Sai
of that.
Gayatri.
I don't know. Can't answer.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Okay, second question. I think many people over here want to know your opinion and your comments and the new security systems that you have in Prashant Nilayam. We all understand his divinity, there's no doubt about it, but your reflections and the incident and the new security things that we have in Prashant Nilayam, just your opinion, your comments, just to enlighten us.
What do you say?
The incident on Swami in Prashant this past summer, where people tried to kill him. Your reflection on that incident as well as the security they have afterwards in the ashram.
I honestly don't know about events in the ashram the last summer. I'm sorry. Okay, next question.
Dr. Islam, I'm a Buddhist, and the way I have studied Buddhism, I'm a Buddhist, and I have questions all the time because the way I have studied Buddhism, Lord Buddha didn't talk of God entity, like that he is the God. So sometimes I have doubts. I wonder whether Sai Baba had said anything about it, so that I will understand it more.
Dr. Swami. We think the question was that when Swami says, I am God and so are you, she has doubts about one side of the equation. Which side is the doubt of?
Because in the Buddhist scriptures, I haven't read that Lord Buddha said that he is God to that effect.
That's doubtful. Yeah. All right, the question apparently is that when Swami says, I am God, why should she believe him? And why should she believe him? No?
Buddha, in her reading about Buddha,
Yeah.
she has not read that Buddha has said that he is God, that Buddha is God.
Oh. No, you see, Buddha was on the path of, he was exemplar of the path of wisdom. And when he entered in his final meditation, he left his kingdom because he saw a dead man and a sick man, and he wanted to know, well, hey, what's all this about? So he left his kingdom and went to the mountains and joined a band of yogis and engaged in such austerity that all he would eat was half a dozen grains of rice a day. And after engaging in that deep austerity, he realized that he wasn't going to get any place with that. So he left his band of cohorts and went down into the plains of India and sat beneath a tree with the resolve that he would not arise from that position until he had understand the true purpose of life and who he really and truly was. And so in that meditation, he found that there's only one, not other, and he is that one. So he was talking about the path of wisdom and not about the path of devotion. So he didn't mention God at all. Next question.
So,
incidentally, on what basis do I say that? Well, my wife and I, for some 8 years, went every year to Burma, spending 1 or 2 or 3 months in the caves underneath the pagoda doing the Vipassana meditation. So at that time, we went quite deeply into Buddhism, and I was quite satisfied with the Vipassana meditation, which was really wonderful, until I met Swami, which was the supreme. Then I put even the Buddha meditation aside. Next question.
Sir, it has been easy to follow Sai teachings to some extent at home and other Sai gatherings, but it is very difficult to follow Sai teachings at workplace. When you go to work, it is a different atmosphere, and you tend to forget Sai teachings. So, particularly you have to sell yourself at your workplace. That's what your boss says, and you cannot have the detachment of work. You have to advertise what you did and all those things. So particularly in that respect, are there any suggestions?
Did you understand?
At home and at conferences, at the center, it's easy to follow Sai's teachings. At work, it's harder. You have to get into work and your boss is on you to do particular worldly things. How do you follow his teachings? How do you stick to the path?
When you're doing worldly things.
At work in particular.
Yeah, I see. I hope you will excuse my hearing, but as the case with many people as they get older, you lose certain of the high notes in the voices. You don't hear them. And then you try a hearing aid at $750 or $800, and that doesn't make any difference. So then you enlist a hearing aid right here, you see. Okay, so the question is, as I understand it, that when you go to work, you have to work hard all day for your boss and do what you're told to do. And how do you synchronize that with Swami's teachings? You see, Swami has said that if you keep him in your company all day long, think of him constantly all day long, Walk hand in hand with him as you go down the street. Have him as your companion at dinner. Have a chair for him in your room where he's always sitting. Make room for him when you're riding in the car. And don't be putting junk where he's sitting. Keep that, keep that vacant. Then when you actually come to your job and have to pay attention to it or get fired, what you say in effect is, "Dear Lord, now I must do my work." Swami says, wonderful. Then do your work, but do it with utmost concentration. Don't be thinking of a million things when you're doing your work. Pay attention to your job. Do your job. Do it perfectly. Do it with total concentration. And Swami himself is that which is at the point of concentration. So you can be with Swami all day long, whether you're working or not working. Next question.
Dr. Hislop, I wonder if Swami had ever commented to you about, for instance, the soul selecting its next body, and on is the body like a child's body that's maybe mentally or physically handicapped, or can the soul also know if a person in the later years would have a mental or physical handicap?
Did you get it? Percy, did you get it?
Yes. The question was, when a soul selects a new body of an infant, it may know the qualities of that infant body. Would it also know the qualities of that body in later life? Would it know what problems that body would face in old age?
I mean the person,
and is it affect?
Does the soul know about the future life when it chooses a new body in which to reincarnate?
The jivi.
And is it the whole family included? Is it the body or the whole family included when they make the selection?
You see, as far as we are concerned, birth is thrust upon us. We didn't ask for it and might not welcome it. And likewise, when death comes, that's thrust upon us. We may not like it and may not welcome it. Well, what are we talking about there? We're talking about the body, aren't we? You see, we're talking about the body. Then your question is, the jivi, that is the individualized atma, comes into the body. Does the jivi know all about the past history of its life that brought about this particular birth, and perhaps about the future also? Now, Swami has said that in respect to the past, if you want to know the past history of this body, this useless temporary body, and its other temporary births, that you can know it. If you give it enough attention, give it full attention, you can know about your past births. That's possible. About the future, I presume that you could also know about the future, because Swami knows about the future, and in effect you are Swami, so you can know about that too. If you penetrate to the soul of yourself, the very nucleus of your being, you can know everything. Swami says, why ask all these questions? Why not penetrate yourself and find who you are and what you are? Then you will know everything in the world. You will know the answer to everything once you penetrate and find who you are. So honestly, that's about all I can say on that. Next question.
Dr. Hislop, I wish to congratulate you on your book that you published. My question is, since this book covers a certain part of Swami's life, will there not be a need for another volume of yours to cover the latter part of the continuation of his teachings?
Are you going to write another book describing teachings in the life of Sai Baba since the period covered by your previous book?
Oh, yes, I'm often asked the question, will I write another book? Honestly, my response is 2 books is enough. There's too many books in the world now. So what I will do, the next edition of Conversations, there are some other conversations that occurred subsequent to that. And I plan to include that final batch of conversations in the book. Nowadays, I see Swami occasionally and have conversations with him. And there are other questions that I would dearly love to ask. and get answers to, really quite deep questions. But Swami is hard to tie down. You know, now, now when I was up to see Swami a couple years ago, I said, Swami, you promised that you would answer some other questions for me. And they're questions that everybody wants to know the answer to. So can you make time now? And Swami said, Hislop, no time now. But he said, you come to Kodaikanal, there'll be lots of time then. See? So I come to Kodaikanal. And the old devotees there are invited into Swami's house in the afternoon. See, Swami talks to the boys about 4 times a day. When they get up in the morning, after breakfast, then they go for a bit of a tour, and then they come back in and Swami talks to them again. And the boys ask questions and so on. So on that last question and answer in the afternoon, some of the older devotees are invited to come in the house. And we can sit there and listen to the boys and then listen to Swami give a discourse. So the first time then at Kodaikanal, when Swami passed me, he's right here and I'm sitting here, and he passes, I say, Swami, when can we have our questions and answers? He went a couple steps and then turned back and said, oh. He said, sorry, no time. So there you are. I'll try my best to get more questions and answers, because I have some really interesting questions to ask. Next question.
Dr. Hislop, there's been a lot of talk in the United States about a new age coming and a lot of natural disasters occurring before this new age comes. Has Sai Baba ever said anything to you about that?
Perry?
Is there a new age coming that will mean a lot of natural disasters in the United States?
Oh, yes. How about the United States falling under the earth and a land mass arising from New Zealand to Australia, New Zealand having disappeared, and California having fallen into the sea, and everybody should move to Fresno? Well, you know, over the years, the people in California who are like that, they continually ask these questions. Somebody has gone to Swami, and Swami has told that person that some great natural disaster is going to occur, or a series of them, very specific about them. Then that person leaves Swami and comes and tells everybody else, and then it finally gets to me in California. So I say, okay, I'll ask Swami. So almost every time that I go to Swami and have a conversation with him, in the past at least, I would say, Swami, this person says that he went to you and you said that California is going to fall into the sea and New Zealand is going to disappear completely. So I said, Hislop, I didn't say anything like that. I don't make any remarks about that. He said, Hislop, things will continue as they always have. There will be the ordinary series of natural disasters, no great catastrophes. And the natural disasters that do occur, Hislop, are brought about by the wrong thinking and the wrong behavior of people. Next question.
Dr. Hislop, you just spoke of collective consciousness. Yesterday, you talked about how the universe is constantly changing. Could you expound on that and how our thoughts and our beliefs do affect what goes on in the earth? And also, how we as Sai devotees can help Swami on his mission.
Perry?
First, how do the thoughts and feelings of human beings influence the earth, like earthquakes and things like that? And second, what can we as devotees do to help Swami with his mission?
All right, you heard the question. How about earthquakes and the like? How do they occur? Why do they occur?
How do human thoughts and feelings influence?
How do human thoughts, because I just said that Swami said that the disasters are due to human thoughts and feelings. Well, nowadays, really one shouldn't have to ask that question, because you may not be a scientist or even bother with science. But it's well known now that there's no difference between a thought and a material object. There's no difference at all. They're both just comprised of vibrations. The thought is one series of vibrations at one frequency, and the material object is a different frequency and different vibrations. So thoughts very easily, for example, about UFOs. When I tackle Swami on UFOs, I say, but Swami, they they got the wreckage of a UFO, and it's in the government secret laboratories in Washington. And the government denies it, but everybody knows it's there. And Swami said, well, Hislop, don't you know that imagination can even create material objects? See? So therefore our thoughts are apparently quite easily converted to material things, because it's just a matter of changing the frequency of the vibration. And then the second part of your question, what can we do to help Swami's mission? First of all, it's not our job to go out and preach to the world. See? Swami says, I don't need your help with the world. Swami said, God is quite able to take care of his own world without your help. See? He says, but in the course of your life, when you come to a situation where you can help somebody, you do so. Well, why do you want to help somebody? Because you have a feeling of compassion and love for that person. You recognize subconsciously that that person is no other than yourself and no other than God. And you have a feeling of compassion and love for that person. That's why you do something good for another person. And that's the way that you can help the world, through seva like that. And when you are doing seva for another person, Swami said, be aware that you are doing that seva for Swami. You are doing it to Swami, not to the person. God can take care of all those persons. You would like to be up in Swami's room, up above the interview room, and be able to sit in front of him and massage the calf of his legs, like the Indian devotees sometimes do, and like I had the privilege of doing too. But how many people can crowd up into that little room? See? So what chance do you have of doing seva to Swami? Well, every time you do seva to another person, you're doing seva to Swami, because that person is no other than Swami. Next question.
Dr. Hislop here. My question is based on my observation of you. 8 years back, I saw you at St. Louis retreat, and today I saw you at this retreat. My observation is that you look more relaxed, you look more radiant, and you're giving more concentrated or pointed lectures. Now my question is, when you are in position of power, let's say you were telling 80-20 English versus Hindi songs or that kind of things, when you were president of United States Science Centers and all. My question is, the position of power, is it obstruction in relaxation and devotion?
Perry?
Briefly, you used to be head of the American Sai organization, and you were involved in a lot of controversies. Like at one time you said bhajans should be 80% English, something like that. And Tulloch says that you seem a lot more relaxed now and focused on things than you were 8 years ago. And he asked whether being in a position of authority like that was disturbing to your peace of mind.
Well, it certainly occupied my mind.
Is it obstruction?
Yeah.
Any human being, not personally you.
Yeah.
Any human being, when he is in position of power, maybe not only Science Center, maybe in the office, maybe wherever you are.
See, when the person is in the position of power, he tends to think that he is responsible. If things go wrong, it's his fault, he didn't do things properly, and so on. So he finds himself concerned with the actions he does and the results of those actions too. A little later on, when he's free of that pressure, he realizes that nothing could be more silly than that. You know, that it is God who moves everybody, and one doesn't need to worry whether it turns out according to what I think it should or not, because my wishes in respect to any endeavor is just one small part of what's going to happen in that endeavor. All the influences of the universe are engaged in every endeavor that anybody does, plus Swami's will too. So any endeavor just has a very small part of the person doing the work engaged in that work. And then you realize that, so you stop worrying so much. So now I don't have to worry about that. Bill and Goldstein have to worry. Okay, next question. See, somebody has to tell me when the time's up. I'll forget, you know. Hey, the time's up already, isn't it?
One more.
Huh?
One more.
All right.
Okay, my question is twofold. Has Baba ever talked about the issue of abortion? And what about the soul who is going to enter a body, who is going, a fetus, who is going to be aborted? Has the soul chosen that situation?
Harry?
First question, what has Swami said about abortion? And second, what about a soul that enters a fetus and then the fetus is aborted? What's happening to that soul?
Yeah. It's a question that you see in the newspapers every day. And my wife said, my God, I never get so sick of a subject as I am. Every time you turn on the TV or look at the newspaper, that's the topic. So I asked Swami one time, because that's a concern, and the concern of the devotees is my job to give to Swami. So I asked Swami, how about abortion and so on? He said, Hislop, that's woman's business, none of your business. So that's the end of my knowledge about abortion. So thank you for listening to me. Huh? Oh, okay. Oh, one more. Okay. Really, one more.
Dr. Hislop, has Swami ever elaborated to you what he means by the golden age is coming?
Swami talks about the coming golden age. Has he explained more concretely to you what that means?
Yes. Swami has told me a number of times about this so-called golden age. In the older days when I was spending more time in India, and the old cottage was there on Vrindavan, Swami very often had me come up and have lunch with him and have breakfast with him and so on. So I had a chance to ask questions. And so I said to Swami, you speak of the golden age. How can the golden age be? Things are getting worse, not better. And Swami said, yes, that's true. Even in India, things are getting much worse. More crime, more violence, more trouble, and so on. But he said, Hislop, it's like this. He says, at sea, the center of the ocean, there may be some tremendous storm, some gigantic storm. That storm comes to an end, but the heaviest waves from that storm still have to break upon the shores. So he said, that's the case now. He said, don't worry, before Prema Sai is born, all will be peace and love in the world. Now, he's told me that several times, despite the fact that all evidence is to the contrary. Okay?